Welcome to the Broncos podcast with Troy Rink. I'm your host, Troy Rink, columnist for the Denver Post. Hope you're having a wonderful start to what is a holiday week for most. A lot of kids are out of school. A lot of people are traveling. And a lot of Broncos country is really feeling the good vibes. Broncos will travel to Washington, D.C. for a Sunday night matchup in prime time. This is not the game we had hoped. We had hoped to see, that big C.J. Stroud game earlier in the year, and unfortunately he left with a concussion. You hope to see the Jaden Daniels game, and he's still dealing with an elbow issue, so he is not going to be playing on Sunday. The Broncos need these games. As crazy as it sounds, if you would have said this before the season, they have a real shot at the top seed, but certainly the number one goal first is to win the AFC West, and you can't give up any of these layup games coming up against Washington and the Raiders, and they're coming off a bye week. What did they learn from that bye week? What is Sean Payton identifying as things that need to change as this team moves forward? Do they need to get another running back? Do they need to, tweak the offense a little bit? Who needs to step up? Will we see Pat Surtain? What about Alex Singleton? Will he be back this week? We're going to get into all of that with my colleague from the Denver Post, Luca Evans, right after the break. You've been injured in a car wreck, hurt at work. What are you waiting for? Give my friends at Hoggatt Injury Law a call. Their motto with us, it's personal. It's because it is. I've known Darby Hoggatt forever. We became good friends. Many of his clients have become his good friend. You don't even have to pay Darby up front. Your case goes as planned. Darby will be the one writing checks to you. So again, if you've been hurt at wreck or injured in a car wreck, give Darby's team a call. That's 1-833-HOGGATT. That number on the screen there. Write it down, 1-833-464-4288. Or visit the website at hoggattlaw.com. All right, welcome to the Broncos podcast. I'm your host, Troy Rink, and I am joined now by my colleague, Luca Evans from the Denver Post. Luca had a chance to sneak home for a few days. Luca, how you doing, my friend?
We're ready. We're rested, coming off the bye, ready for this stretch run. Sean Payton does too after a little time away. Just came in instantly on Monday and laid out the touch points for the rest of the year. So we'll see what happens.
What is going to be more difficult, Luca? You driving in snow or them incorporating Evan Ingram or some new element into the offense?
Definitely me driving in snow. I've never done. I was like, should I get snow tires, because I don't really want to have to worry about chains. But I think at this point I'm just gonna ride it out, and if I'm conspicuously absent from one practice, you'll know the reason why.
Right. Yeah, you'll be fine. There'll be a couple of days where you're like a little bit of white knuckle types. I mean, you'll know right away. It's just the ice. It's never the snow.
Yeah.
It's people like, oh, if I have a 4-wheel drive or heavier car, it doesn't matter on black ice. You can't stop. That's the only issue. It's not the snow. It's rarely is it the snow. It's the ice. But you'll be fine. So you mentioned, Sean Payton. He identifies kind of these touchstone points that they need to improve. And you see our first headline there. And I knew it was still bad. I didn't realize they were the worst. He talked about penalties on the conference call on Monday. Luca, I mean, I have covered the NFL off and on since '96 at different times. This is about 15 straight years now, it feels like. I don't ever remember a championship level team leading the league in penalties. Maybe like the 70s Raiders back in the day, with 8 Hall of Famers. What is the key for this team? Because they not only lead the league in penalties, but in penalty yards. How do they address that? What was Coach Payton saying about that early this week as the team moves forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly an anomaly just for them to be sitting where they are and leading the league, playing as whatever you want to call it, undisciplined or whatever the reason for those are, but sitting at 9-2 and leading the league in that category. And I think, really they've come from a variety of angles. I went back a couple weeks ago and just kind of looked at, the nature of the penalties, especially offensively and kind of where they were coming from. And it's been just all over the map in terms of, you kind of more early on in the year, you had just issues even lining up, false starts on receivers and whatnot, and kind of consistent issues throughout the year just with ineligible guys downfield on the offensive line. You obviously have your holding penalties here and there. Those will pop up, but And then defensively, of course, Riley Moss has been the target of a lot of flags. So realistically, we've asked Sean Payton about it throughout the year, and his point, at one point he just put up a screen in front of players and said, "Hey, here's the penalty count. Here's you know who's leading in penalties and yards and whatnot." But um, it's a tough line because you sacrifice aggressiveness at a certain point if you're overcoaching against penalties, and obviously that's kind of one of the foundational points of this team's identity. So how do you fix that? I don't really know. As I think that's a coaching issue um that runs pretty deep, and so that'll be interesting to see what they do with that. The other point that Sean brought up was the turnover differential,
Right.
which for all their brilliance on defense, they haven't been able to consistently kind of take the ball away, and that hasn't hurt them so far, but that may begin to kind of creep into play later. Bo Nix has generally done a pretty decent job of taking care of the ball, but when your turnovers given up outweigh your turnovers produced, that's not a recipe for success either. So I think two key things to kind of try and turn the pendulum on a little bit.
It is interesting. You talk about the pre-snap penalties. Luca, they have 29 pre-snap penalties. Like seventh, eighth worst in the league. And
Yep.
I do believe some of that's operational, where Sean Payton getting, the hockey line changes, guys getting in late, Bo
Yep.
yelling at guys. I mean, the second half of that Chiefs game, it was a much smoother operation. They sprinkled in up tempo, and they were getting them to the line sooner,
Yep.
12, 13 seconds. I think some of that's coaching, where you're getting guys and they're just discombobulated. They're getting there
Yep.
late, and then they're hearing late, and then it becomes even more amplified on the road, frankly, than at home. But you're still seeing them at home. But they got to eliminate the pre-snap stuff. Some of the post-snap stuff, especially on defense, I don't have a huge issue with, because you're trying to send messages. Some of it's price of doing business. You're being
Right.
aggressive. Now, it's different if a guy's 5 yards out of bounds and you do something dumb. But if it's one of those bang, bang, maybe it was late, maybe it wasn't. Some of that is price of doing business. But pre-snap, you can't have it. And Moss has learned. Like Moss gets screwed. He gets hosed on his share of calls. There's no doubt. But he's got to stop grabbing the jersey. Like that's
Yep.
just one of those obvious ones. Like some of it, he's turning his head. He's in good position. That's fine. And he's gotten robbed on those. But he's got to stop grabbing. And he talked about the boxing gloves, right? So
He did. He did. Yeah. Yeah. We'll see if he comes out to practice just wearing, just Muhammad Ali style or whatnot. But yeah, I mean, the thing is on his plays, he's almost always in good position. Like you watch back and he's never, he's gotten burned a few times, but every cornerback will get burned a few times. Like on his penalties, it's not that the issue is he's never like in a bad spot and kind of fighting to catch up, and then he commits a flag that way. It's more that he's in position and then he's just kind of grabbing, like you said, he's just kind of grabbing at the jersey, and that's what he gets dinged for. So I do think those are he leads the league by now in flags on cornerbacks. I think some of that, I think it's a combination of player and officiating, knowing player, but I do think that is a little bit more correctable. But yeah, going back offensively, they do have several team delay of games overall, and especially you saw it a little bit more earlier in the year, where they would take, they've taken timeouts as well in the first half of games to try and, to prevent that. So operationally, offensively, something that continues to need to get cleaned up, but realistically, the system is not changing with what Sean Payton is doing in terms of personnel shifting. So that'll stay consistent.
yeah, it's funny. Anytime we ask Coach Lombardi about that, and he's just like, "Yeah, that's not going away." I mean, a
Yep.
lot of teams
And Sean
create.
said it too. Yeah.
Yeah, Sean's basically like, it's not changing. And that's fine. I mean, I disagree with it on some level, because most teams create mismatches through motion now rather than personnel change. Whatever. But you just got to get it in sooner for your young quarterback. If it's Drew Brees, everything can happen late, because he's really got a he's got this Pentium processor in his brain, and you're the voice inside his head. So you have more time. With the kid, you got to give him a little more time. We'll hit on one more point and then go to a quick break. But what did you see, Luca, with the Bo Nix, Sean Payton partnership, and what can they work on? How can that be positive momentum going forward based on what we saw in the second half specifically? Because I don't want to say a lot changed. Parker and I talked about this over the weekend.
Yep.
Gabriel, statistically in the first half, they had 5 first downs. They weren't great. The second half, he went 7 for 8 in the third quarter for 131 yards. And in that drive, they missed. I wrote about it on Sunday. They mixed in up tempo, no huddle. And Bo's going to have to do some of the stuff Sean does. Sean's going to have to help Bo. But where do you see that balance? And is there an Evan Ingram sighting coming up? Is there a way to maybe, with J.K. Dobbins out, like one of the advantages when you know a guy's out is you can plan around it. It sucks because Dobbins, for me, was their best offensive player.
Yep.
But does this allow you to how do they plan moving forward to help Bo? Is he part of the run game a little more? Do we see Ingram more? Do they keep leaning on Franklin? Does Mims go from gadget to more of a 2? How do you kind of see this offense fitting moving forward?
Yeah, I think to me, one thing that I'd be really curious to see if they do more of is more just stuff where Bo's under center and playing a little bit more on the move. I thought he looked really good against the Chiefs, and I thought, frankly, Sean Payton designed more of this stuff for him. I don't have direct evidence of this. This is just something I was noticing watching the game. This is him playing more, doing more bootleg stuff, designed, throwing on the move, what have you. And I think he's so much better in terms of throwing in those situations and making decisions in those situations versus, he's obviously really good at times when he scrambles, but that also can lead him to danger. And I think when he's on the run, but he's playing on the rails, that's a really good,
right.
It's a really good kind of, system for him. And I think especially with Dobbins out, the way to maybe create a little bit more dynamism in the run game and obviously the pass game is just to look a little bit more play action and that sort of thing. I think RJ Harvey would do pretty well in that type of system also. So I don't know that, they play very heavily out of the shotgun and what have you. So I don't know that that's ever going to be a major featured part of this offense, but they did incorporate some of that last game. And I thought Bo looked really good in those situations. And he was in rhythm. He was in rhythm the entire game. It was just, those are the situations where Sean Payton has talked about the environment, around the quarterback. At plenty of times this year, it's been Bo Nix's fault. Plenty of times it's been more so whether it's offensive penalties, the dysfunction around him, he just gets taken out of rhythm so quickly. Oftentimes when there's a penalty or a 1st and 10 becomes a 1st and 20 or a 2nd down becomes a 2nd and, and then at the same time, he was really able, I think, to stay in it against the Chiefs, even when, Troy Franklin had a couple of drops. Things weren't exactly going their way in the first half, but he was dealing, really from the first quarter until the end of the clock. So I think that's the Bo Nix that they'll need, from the stretch run and into the playoffs. And then I think whoever it is, Troy Franklin kind of needs to keep growing. I just think Marvin Mims was on a snap count. Know that for sure, just coming out of the concussion. But for him, I think he had 1 touch in 15 snaps or something like that. To me, he just opens so much up in this offense, and he's always making a play when his number's called. So I think he's really the guy, and I don't really see Evan Ingram's role changing all that much from what it's been at this point. I just think Adam Troutman has for better or worse cemented his role in this offense. They're more efficient team when he's on the field in terms of in the run in the pass. So I think I don't see that changing a whole lot.
Yeah, you make a great point, Luca, that it's funny because Bo Nix on the move has not been accurate, but on the move in bootleg is controlled. That is guardrails. That's kind of got a governor to it. Because him scrambling around at times this year, he hasn't been as accurate as he was last year. But I've said that, like when you get him in a bootleg, those one side reads, it's a little easier for him because
Yep.
he's not running around. It's like it's a controlled chaos, if you will, or controlled motion. So, and he's such a good athlete. I know he talked on. Couldn't believe he was on Pat McAfee. I mean, Bo was still Bo. He wasn't exactly. I think he looked like he was at his dad's high school coaching office back in Alabama. I could
Good
be
one.
wrong, but it definitely looked like it. But Bo, I don't know if McAfee thought Bo was gonna like show this weird side of his personality. I was just like, that's not Bo. Maybe somewhere in there down the road that will be, but they need him to play well. There's no question. And when the reason they made the playoffs last year is because the last 12 games last season he was really good. He protects the ball. He doesn't take sacks, but they're going to need more from him as these games get tougher. And then some news here on a Tuesday about Alex Singleton and his
Yep.
progress. I want to get that real. We'll get to that after the break. But Alex Singleton, folks, sounds like he's got a realistic shot to play Sunday night at Washington. We're going to get that after the break. Listen, when you face curveballs from family challenges, divorce, legal separation, child support, alimony, custody, you need a lawyer who understands the human dynamics, the courtroom, and is willing to fight for you. You need Ted Shih. He's a graduate of the Cal Berkeley Law School. Ted brings 40 years of courtroom and 20 years of family law experience to your corner. He's been a social worker, a police detective. First and foremost, though, he's a trial lawyer. He has tried cases across Colorado and the country. Martindale Hubbell ranks Ted among the top lawyers in the U.S. You want an expert to navigate your family challenge? Call Ted. His passion is putting you first. He will work to settle your case, but again, not afraid to go toe to toe in a courtroom. Ted can be reached at theoshih at AOL.com, TheOshih at AOL.com, or give him a call. Write this down 303 475 2981. That's 303 475 2981. Ted promises to respond to your concerns within 24 hours, 365 days a year. We want to welcome back my colleague Luca Evans. We had news today with Alex Singleton going on an exclusive interview with Good Morning America. I'm hoping at some point you or Parker will get a chance to sit down with Alex as well.
Yep.
Talking on Good Morning America today that his plan is to play, and our story is posted at the Post right now that sources say that he's been cleared to practice. Again, it was only a couple of weeks ago he was diagnosed with testicular cancer during the week of the Raiders game. So he played in that game knowing he was going to have surgery the following morning or that weekend. And then he obviously missed the next game. But, man, what does that mean for the defense? And I don't know how those pieces all fit. I know there's still going to be a role for Justin Strnad, but he's an energy guy. He's a winning type player. So I know he takes more shade on social media than any like good guy because of the tackling issue. Like people just wear him out. And I'm like, the guy plays. He plays hurt. He never misses time outside. He had an ACL where he played a whole game with a torn ACL, and then he plays a game knowing he's going to have surgery the next day. But there has to be a role for him, right, Luca? There's got to be some. I mean, I think we both have confidence Vance Joseph will find a way to use Greenlaw, and Strnad, right?
Yeah, I mean, if Singleton's healthy, I don't see a situation in which he's not the starting Mike for the rest of the year. I mean, Vance Joseph said the week that he didn't play, he allows Vance Joseph to call the game in a certain way because of his IQ as the communicator. And even Vance at one point called a coverage that was a little bit off, and Alex Singleton just kind of fixed it, in the Raiders game. And there's a level of veteran experience and savvy that I think, just matters so much in his defense that even we can't touch unless we're actually on the field, next to him. And he's been really good against the run this year. Obviously, he hasn't been the best in coverage. Everyone knows that, but that doesn't take away from what he is good at as a player. So I do think there's, I think if he's healthy, I will be curious to see, maybe there's a snap count, maybe there's certainly more Strnad. Right. And I think what the Chiefs game did certainly is it proved that Justin Strnad can fill in, he's earned himself a pretty big payday, whether it's with the Broncos, his contract is up at the end of this year, whether it's with Denver or with someone else, he's proven not only that he can play will and off ball and blitz and do a lot of different things, be successful in coverage at times, and also against the Chiefs. Like, he did a tremendous job at Mike, and that was, I think, the first time that he played Mike in his career and called the defense. He had the green dot.
Right.
So that gives the Broncos more versatility, flexibility, especially if Alex Singleton is on a snap count. And Justin Sternad can fill in for him at times in specific packages, play next to Greenlaw. So there's a lot of different things now that Vance Joseph can do, and maybe there's situations. I just don't, Singleton has been on the field so much this year that I don't see Vance Joseph taking him off to put Justin Sternad in unless there is unless he's on a snap count or what have you. But there is flexibility, there is versatility there, and obviously just tremendous news for Alex Singleton and his family that the pathology came back clear, that he's getting back to playing and being on the field, and he's a guy that you feel he's been, as Vance Joseph said, in every meeting room, and he's still been with the team, even though going through, I'm sure, an incredibly scary time. So just a big blue guy for this organization.
Yeah, Singleton is just when he was originally signed, look, he was supposed to be a special teams guy, a special teams ace, and he just worked his way into the lineup, and he's just so consistent. Then he started putting up these just mesmerizing tackling numbers where he's getting like 21 tackles in a
Yep.
game, like these all-time tackle numbers. And it just I have a lot of admiration for the way he plays the game, the passion for which he plays, how much he cares. He's a winning teammate. The guy, he's the kind of guy you win with. Like you said, when he's hurt, he remains tethered. He's about helping other guys when he's been out. It'll be interesting on the green dot thing if he's on a play count, how that would work. My guess is, I think he's good, right?
Yep.
You can't have 2 green dots, so I would assume he would have it. But this is a guy, folks, that in that locker room, he's one of those like guys we talk about when I coach sports with kids. Like, either you're a fountain or you're a well. He's a fountain. He's a fountain. Like, he brings energy. There's a current that runs through him. And it's just remarkable. Like you said, I just talked to one of my friends that's going through cancer treatments now. And he was saying how much of an inspiration someone like Alex is. When you look for ways and for hope, and cancer is such a screwed up thing that it's all affected all of our lives probably in some way. But good for Singleton. It's remarkable. It's a quick turnaround. But obviously, as you said, look, he has to be cleared. There's no way they're putting him out there without the right pathology and without believing, and he wasn't gone long enough to probably fall out of shape, if you will. So I would think in that way it's good. And as we move forward, Luca, when teams do special things, as we transition, when you're 9-2, players that you weren't expecting usually end up stepping up. And now as we get into the second half of the season, Sean Payton, this will be your first full season covering him. He has this saying, like, they're not rookies anymore. Like when you get into the second part of the season, the last quarter of the season, there'll be a quote at some point in the press. We're like, well, they're not rookies anymore. I don't see them that way. When you just did a remarkable profile on Pat Bryant, talking to those friends of his from the Jacksonville area where loyalty means everything to Pat. And frankly, you see it in the way he plays, the way he's loyal to the way he blocks, loyal to his teammates. I mean, I do see him having a future because he is a selfless player that fits in with winning teams. But when you look at these young players, Jahdae Barron, whose role has expanded certainly, but could we see Pat Surtain? What do we see Jahdae's role being kind of moving forward? Pat Bryant, RJ Harvey. What are some of these young guys? When you look at some of these young guys, we'll start with Bryant, because I encourage all of you to go read that profile that Luca did on Pat, talking to his parents and friends of his, frankly, who made bad decisions and who are incarcerated. But we'll start with Pat and then move on to the others. What kind of role do you see for Pat moving forward? Has he carved out a niche? We'll start there.
Yeah, I think really, I don't see. I think he's established such a foothold in the offense at this point that I don't think little Jordan Humphrey is taking targets away from him or snaps away from him or what have you. Like his target share has just climbed and climbed and climbed. Really at every point this year, and I think the key for him has just been there were so many games in the middle of the year where he was getting open or getting some separation, especially across the middle, and just, he wasn't the first read and didn't have, maybe that established chemistry with Bo Nix. And then, last game you start to see, in the last few games, you started to see him really kind of take on a larger role, and obviously had that 48-yarder against Kansas City. And I think just that opens up a little bit more in this offense too, because obviously Devon Vele was at times that guy who was, who Bo Nix could trust to make plays over the middle last year. And Pat Bryant is that, with also, frankly, more upside as a blocker, as a run after the catch guy. And so I really see him continuing to, his role is going to fluctuate like every receiver in this offense, but I don't see him, I see him getting at least half of the snap share offensively. He's running a lot of routes. He's going to get his targets. He's going to have his opportunities. So I think he'll be really one of the key pieces in this offense moving forward. And then,
with Jade, what is the expectation now? I mean, J-Mac, listen, this guy reminds
what
me
a game.
He reminds me a lot of Chris Harris. Chris Harris, you didn't cover here, but he undersized guy, undrafted free agent, chip on. I mean, he doesn't have the, a chip on his shoulder. It's the whole bag of Doritos.
Yeah.
Line it up. Give me the best guy.
Yep.
J-Max, not only is he having the game of his life, he's talking in third person in a press conference afterward. I'm like,
well, he's been doing that. He's been doing that. Yeah.
J-Mac, it was like a Seinfeld episode with George. I'm like, I covered Ricky Henderson, so I know what that looks like.
No,
it's very
awesome.
organic form. And I remember late in my career, or late in Ricky's career, not mine, but Ricky, talking about Ricky, when he was with the Padres, he got his 3,000th hit against the Rockies. But J-Mac's not going anywhere.
Oh.
So where does Jade fit in? And are we going to see Pat Surtain this week? Do we? That seems like it's always been the goal. Otherwise, you should have put him on the IR, at least in my estimation.
Yeah, I mean, it seems it seems like this should be the circled date, for his return. In that case, I mean, I think either way, Jade Barron is still going to have a pretty key role at this point, and whether his snap share, he's been playing obviously inside, outside at times, in Pat Surtain's absence, obviously moving around with Chris Abrams' drain in that role, but he's going to have a pretty key role at this point, because I think you've started to see Vance Joseph trust him a lot when it comes to checking tight ends, especially in, when they're in nickel or dime or whatever it is. He was on Travis Kelce for a few plays, throughout the first half and in big situations, in big spots, and more than held his own. And Kelce got going in the second half when Barron wasn't on him. And I think there's now a demonstrated pattern of him lining up, in passing down situations against a tight end. Brock Bowers against the Raiders, saw some of it against the Giants, which wasn't one of his best games, but he might be a guy who, when Pat Surtain's back, he might not play more than 20 snaps a game, but those 10 to 20 snaps are going to be incredibly just kind of important. And so I think the key is just making sure that he knows and understands that role and is comfortable in that. He's obviously been, he was heavily used kind of in dime situations when Pat Surtain was out there. So I do think there's, he's going to have a big role to play for the rest of this year. And I think especially over the last few weeks, come on really well. And then you talk,
We'll finish with Harvey because he is, people listen to these podcasts, a lot of, there's guys who play fantasy football, so that's part of it. But Dameon Pierce was a guy they had some interest in, and he signs with the Chiefs practice squad. What is the key to get Harvey going in the run game? He's been nice in the past game, and he's certainly been really an effective weapon in the red zone in the past game. But I saw a guy, I'll throw this out there first to get your observation. He was definitely trying to show more patience in the run game against the Chiefs, where
Yep.
instead of like, oh, it's not there, boom, bump outside. Like that's college, and he was definitely not that. He was almost to the point he was like Le'Veon Bell. He was too patient. Like he was trying to wait for the whole develop. So, but I like the fact he was clearly taking to coaching on how he was trying to approach it. What are the expectations for RJ Harvey? Do they think they keep feeding? You think they keep feeding him, or does it become a hot hand issue with he and Jalil, or does Marvin Mims maybe get some of those? What does that run game look like? And I know it's hard because Sean is literally he's a matchup guy, so week to week you can't always say, but clearly they need Harvey to be decent going forward to help overcome the absence of our J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah, I think he's the most important rookie young guy that they have at this point, because they, my thinking, understanding, whatever you want to call it, is they were in on Pierce because that's a 215-pound guy,
Right.
a more of a traditional power back. They don't have a guy like that on the roster anymore at this point. Obviously, not that J.K. Dobbins was a traditional power back, but just kind of a guy who can take some hits and absorb, again, just some hits kind of between the tackles
It
and
was supposed to
whatnot.
be
And
estimate, honestly. It would have been
yep,
estimate, but
yeah.
rallied on him, obviously.
And they don't have a guy who's bigger than Harvey's the biggest guy on the roster in the running back room at 5'8", 205. And, so there's going to be a lot on him if they don't find a back that they like, if there's not one, on the free agent market or practice squad somewhere, what have you. He's going to need to be the between the tackles guy. Jaleel McLaughlin, obviously, just great effort and great fight in the red zone against the Chiefs, but he's not going to be, a goal line hammer between the tackles bruiser. Obviously, he's more of a change of pace guy, and I do see him. I think it was telling that Sean Payton just brought him up and said he'd have a big role on Monday down the stretch. So I see a situation where he and Harvey are splitting carries. But when Jaleel McLaughlin's in the game, he only played 8 snaps
Right.
against the Chiefs total and got 6 carries and I think 1 target on those. So when he's in the game, he's getting the ball. RJ Harvey played, I think, 61% snap share against Kansas City. Like, he's now stepping into the Dobbins role where regardless of the carries he's getting or the touches he's getting, he's going to have to fill a number of jobs. Obviously, I think he'll probably flare out of the backfield and get a number of targets just the rest of the year because he's in on so many passing downs. But he, obviously his development in pass pro is going to be huge, just playing more first, second downs, what have you. So he's such a key figure, I think, that the rest of this year. And he obviously has that breakaway speed, but he's actually been significantly better and more efficient when he's running between the tackles this year. And I think maybe some of that is to do with him, as you mentioned, kind of searching for outside holes that aren't there. But, he has the ability to be that between the tackles guy. And this is what you drafted him in the second round for. So there's no option to me other than to give him the lion's share of the work and roll with it.
Yeah, there just isn't. I think Jamal Williams is out there as a free agent, but there's no
Yeah,
true
Zach
answer.
Moss, there's not.
Yeah, there's no guy
Yeah.
you see and go, oh, obviously he would help. Now, again, to add depth as a practice squad. When people are like, why didn't they get Pierce? Well, they didn't want to put him on the 53. And when
Yep.
a guy's not playing, that's the other thing I always tell fans. Guys become available for a reason. Now, sometimes it's fit. Most of the time, it's ineffectiveness. So you don't want to just, I mean, you're a 9-2 team, start giving away 53-man roster spots. It just doesn't work that way. When you're terrible, you
Yeah.
throw stuff against the wall because you don't care. The back half of your roster is just churning all the time. That's not the case when you get good. So
If they get desperate enough, they can still sign them off practice squad, or they can sign someone off a practice squad or whatever it is. But right now, clearly they're not at that point just yet.
I would see Sean doing it before the Christmas Day game. That would
just
be
as a screw
that,
you.
yeah, that would be a Sean move, especially. I mean, I think they have a realistic shot to go 4-2, finish with 13 wins, which is I picked them to go 11-6 and win the division. So that was I thought I was hedging it a little. 13, it would be crazy if they went 13 and not get the 1 seed in the AFC. It's going to be very
It's very
difficult.
possible.
with the Patriots because the Patriots' schedule is Charmin soft moving forward. The Broncos need the Bills to beat them. And the Broncos are in a weird spot because, like, you want the Bills to win enough so you don't want to see them. Like, as a 2 seed to see the Bills as a 7 would suck. And frankly, to see, if I had to pick, if I was the Broncos, I'd want to, if I'm not the 1, I'd want to be a 2 and play Jacksonville. Like, that's a team with no playoff history. Trevor Lawrence is not Lamar Jackson. He's not Patrick Mahomes, and he's not Josh Allen. But the AFC is tough. Whoever you're going to play is going to be tough. But it would stink to go 13-4 and face like Buffalo in the first round. That's a tough draw. It doesn't mean it's not winnable because it's home, but holy smokes. But Luca, I cannot wait to see where this ends up. We'll be in Washington on Sunday night, hoping to talk with Von Miller at some point this week. See Von. It's just kind of funny how it's come full circle 10 years later. How the defense in some ways mirrors that group. They don't create the turnovers. You talked about that eloquently. That's the big difference. But they are starting to beat better quarterbacks, folks. And that's what distinguished that 15 team. They beat about 5 Hall of Fame quarterbacks, including Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, Matthew Stafford. I covered all those games. And you start beating Mahomes, that's when those are legacy type games. Luca, I cannot thank you enough for this for jumping on here. I could not do this pod without Hoggatt Injury Law and Darby Hoggatt, Ted Shih and his family law practice, and of course Nate Lundy and Danny Bailey of Mile High Sports. And thanks again to my colleague Luca Evans from the Denver Post. Read all his stuff at denverpost.com/Broncos. Parker Gabriel's stuff's there. My stuff's there. Sean Keeler, and of course Luca. Folks, I do this podcast for you. Happiness that begins with me. Go out there and have a great day.